can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Weisz.
All right, welcome. John Corcoran here. I am the host of this episode, along with my business partner and co-host, Dr. Jeremy Weisz. How you doing, Jeremy?
I'm excited. Let's rock it.
All right. So we're going to push this out. This is a live episode we're doing here today. We're going to push this out on a couple of different podcast feeds, so you'll be able to listen to it after the fact. And of course, I'm the host of the Smart Business Revolution podcast, and you can check out some of my past interviews. I interview smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs in companies and organizations like Netflix, Kinko's, YPO, EO, Activation, Blizzard, LendingTree, OpenTable, and many more. And Jeremy, tell us about Inspired Insider.
Yeah, check out Inspired Insider interviews. I, have had the co-founders of Pixar, Atari, P90X, Ron Popeil, Einstein Bagels, and many more. So check them out.
Heard of a few of those. That's pretty cool. And we are also the co-founders of Rise25, where we help connect B2B business owners with their ideal prospects through podcasting and content marketing. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about how to be a gold medalist at B2B podcasting. Okay, so this will be helpful if you are a B2B business and you are thinking about what are the things that I need to do to be the best, to be the Usain Bolt, to be the Michael Phelps of the world. I don't want to be someone who completely misses the medal stand at the end of the competition. So we're going to talk about some strategies for how you can be really good at doing a podcast. If you're going to do a B2B podcast, we're not going to do a B2C podcast. We're not talking about comedy podcasts. Those things are great. We're not talking about true crime, all the other stuff out there. Those are great, but we're not talking about that. All right. So let's dive into it. Of course, this episode, before we get into that, is brought to you by Rise25, where we help B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. And if you're listening to this, you've ever thought, hey, I'd love to know more about starting a podcast, we would say one of the best things we've ever done. We've both been in the field for 12, 14 years or so, combined 25 or so years in this field. And I love it. Get to meet amazing people all the time, and you would love it as well. So go to rise25.com. You can learn all about what's involved with doing a B2B podcast. And so we're going to be talking about how to be successful and to be really a gold medalist. And let's start, Jeremy, by talking about what we're talking about here. So, in the Olympics, you've got one chance. You may never be back. It happens every 4 years. And it's a great analogy because you're highly specialized and you have specific coaches that come in and help you in different areas. And that's one of the things that we do is help people with B2B podcasting. But at the end of the day, you're either going to be on the medal stand, you're going to have a gold medal, maybe if you're lucky, you have a gold medal, silver medal, bronze medal, or you're going to get nothing. You're going to walk away with nothing. And unfortunately, having done a podcast for so many years now, we see a lot of companies that start podcasts, they do it for 6 months, maybe 12 months, and then they either put it on hiatus and never get back to it, or they quit it entirely. And a lot of times they end up in frustration. And so what we're really passionate about is helping other companies to make sure that they're successful. And so there's a lot of different things that we see people do that lead to a great amount of success. And we see a lot of things that people fixate, focus their time, energy, and attention on that ends up leading to failure or disappointment. And that's really what we try and do, is help people to avoid to land on that. So Jeremy, turning it over to you, we want to make sure we don't sound self-serving here, but that this is something that's going to be valuable to people.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, when we talk about, kind of the analogy, right? What we tell people is to focus on relationship building, right? How do you give to your relationships? And, your relationships within a certain industry is best. Like, you don't want to have necessarily your aunt on or your cousin on. We're talking about B2B businesses here. So you want people in your industry. So it starts with, we talk to people about who are the people in your universe and world, and we're talking about the business world, that you really want to give to, connect to, allow them to talk about their thought leadership. And Again, it goes without saying it's going to be great content because it's going to be about that specific industry, but focus on who are the people and companies you really want to give to. Okay.
And ultimately, that's how you become a gold medalist. Is you first have thought through, okay, who am I going to focus on here? And I talked to someone the other day who said, yeah, we've been doing a podcast for 3 years now, and I look back on the first year's worth of content, and we really didn't focus on the right people. And frankly, I mean, what I was surprised about in that conversation is that they'd continue doing it 3 years later without having gotten a lot of results from it. Because a lot of people, they'll do it for 6 months or so, but after that point, they end up giving up. And so you have a really finite window of time to get some success from it, to get some actual results from it, or else oftentimes we see people give up, and it's just sad to see that sort of thing happen. So, first and foremost, if you want to be a gold medalist, you got to view this as a relationship building tool. It's a networking tool. It's a tool for up-leveling your network. It's a tool for connecting and deepening relationships with people that are going to be valuable for you and for your business. And you got to recognize that that's really some of the true value behind it. So talk a little bit about how that works, Jeremy.
Yeah, I mean, so it reminds me of, as I'm a huge fan of John Wooden, and he has the quote, I think it was attributed to him, never mistake activity for achievement. And so just because you're putting stuff out and it doesn't, just because you have that activity, it doesn't mean you are going to achieve what your goals are. So actually I was talking to someone, and someone was, didn't know us, and they were saying, Jeremy, what separates you? And they sent me actually some communication with someone giving some podcasting advice. And this person had done a podcast for a while. And within 5 seconds, I was like, I know exactly, why I don't agree with this advice at all. And we have a little bit different opinion on certain things from other people sometimes, but this person in 3 different sentences was giving podcasting advice because they podcasted for maybe, 2 years, which is a long time to some people and not to others, but they talked about different numbers. Like when they're talking about metrics, they're talking about downloads,
numbers,
subscribers. And I said, okay, you are an e-commerce business. Okay. You help e-commerce businesses. Let's say you get 1 million downloads. Does that help your business? Are they all, they're probably not all, needing what you have. Now, if he has a mass market product, but this person serves as a B2B business, they help e-commerce businesses. So getting 1 million downloads or subscribers or getting in front of 100,000 Instagram fans is not going to matter. That just doesn't matter. Now, you want to be in the close circle of people that care about that stuff and are in that particular industry.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And it goes back to what I say to people all the time. You have to know what your underlying objectives are in your business. What are your goals in your business? That's what you want to really focus on, because when you accomplish those goals faster because of the podcast, then the podcast has been successful. And if it takes 100 downloads to do that or 100,000 downloads, who cares how many downloads it takes? It doesn't matter. In addition to the fact that, people lie about these things all the time, sad to say, but because the numbers are big black box, they're not publicly known. 50 to 70% of all the downloads come through Apple, and Apple doesn't release download numbers. That, it's sad to say, but we see people all the time who post like, I have a top 100 podcast. Well, what does that mean? I'm looking at the top 100 charts right now. I don't see your podcast on there. By what metric are you counting that? Like maybe once 7 years ago it was on the top 100, or you're just making it up out of thin air, So unfortunately that does happen a lot. What are some other gold medal winning qualities that we see in really successful B2B podcasts?
Yeah. I mean, I think you hit on one, which is know what your goal is. Okay. Someone the other day called me and said, Jeremy, I know that you guys, help people launch and start podcasts. I have this person and I think he should really start a podcast. And he's just going to start his business. And can you talk to him? And I said, it was a little confusing. He's like, he may be getting a job, a job with a company, or he may be starting his business. I was like, okay, well, those are two totally separate things, and I have a totally different strategy and advice for him on his podcast if he's thinking of getting a job. Because I'd be like, okay, cool. Like he wants to get a job, let's say in whatever, the security industry. I would tell him to, really connect with people in the security industry, maybe HR people in the security industry, and really network and add value to those people. And then if it was to start his business, what's the service? And I said, before he should even start a podcast, I said, I don't even think he should start a podcast till he has his main goal written out and know what that is. And if he's starting a business, what's the service he's providing? And then that will depend on who he goes after. So anyways, after that short conversation, he's like, yeah, you should just tell him that. And at least it gives him a starting place. But I would tell that person not even to start a podcast to start.
And I agree with that. One caveat, though, is that, one of the best things you can do for figuring out your market or product market fit is to have great conversations with prospective buyers, with other smart people in your industry. And so that's a big difference between like, I might get a job with a company versus I might start a company, completely different. But if you have more of a focus and a direction, I'm going to start a company, but I'm not exactly sure who's our right client avatar, which is so common, so frequently, the case. Actually taking, the time to have conversations with existing clients, past clients, your champions, the people who love you, others in your industry, the thought leaders, the speakers, the authors in your industry. One of the best ways to figure out who your avatar is, who you should be going after. Some of the biggest insights we've had has been from that.
I totally agree with you on that. And to think about and dip your toe and explore different avatars. In this situation, there was no business. And my fear was, if it doesn't create revenue or money, people quit doing it. And so he, in this situation, had no business. So my fear was he's going to quit after a very short period of time if it doesn't result in business. If you don't have a business or services, then you don't. But yeah, if you're going to explore different topics or avatars, yes, totally. The other one that we talk about a lot is following up and getting more guest recommendations. If we think of kind of gold medalist as a standard for podcasting, people are, and we tell our clients to ask for guest recommendations, ask for introductions of more great guests from their network and your network.
Yeah. And, it's funny, people ask sometimes, should I use the podcast to get referrals? Well, yeah, absolutely. Yes, you absolutely should. It'll work 100 times better than, hey guys, reaching out to your clients and saying, hey clients, next month is looking a little light. Do you mind introducing me to some people that like maybe some others that I could talk to about my service? Because we do a great job, and I'd love to tell them about that. I mean, that's not going to work, right? Whereas leading with, here's the type of person I'd love to be connected with. We're featuring these people on a podcast. Who should we feature? Who would you recommend? And oftentimes people will be really helpful with that. And of course, this comes again with the presumption that you're not going to try and immediately sell someone, that you're going to build a relationship first. You're going to deliver value to that person. You're going to give them exposure and thought leadership using your podcast. And in many cases, that will lead to other things. Nothing ever works 100% of the time, but in many cases it will. What are some other qualities of gold medalists? And then we'll get into the qualities of people who don't land on the medal stand.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is just focusing. It goes deeper on focusing on that relationship, but what else can you do to deepen that relationship and help that person? Not just before the interview, not even on the interview. Obviously, you're going to promote it across the channels, but after. Now, how do you deepen the relationship? So what else could you be doing for that person, right? Could you be making introductions to that person? Could you offer that episode as a resource because that, they talk about their skill set? What else can you do to help that person? Just think it in their shoes. Like when you have someone on, what are they looking for, right?
Yeah. And oftentimes they're looking to get exposure for their company, for their business, for something new that they're launching. interviewed someone earlier today who has a book that he hasn't finished yet, but he's going to be launching it. He's going to want to get promotion around it. Even just the opportunity to talk through the ideas that are going into that book can be helpful for an author as they get better at talking about these things. That can be really helpful.
I've had many people, John, I've had on my podcast, and they've gotten clients from being on the podcast because, and maybe someone who listened to the podcast from me. I mean, numerous people, but it's also something they can use. They can go, hey, like, watch me talk about what I do. And they've gotten clients using that same asset.
And one thing you are really good at is following up, then making an introduction later and sharing that link to that live episode to that person that you're introducing them to. So imagine this scenario. You're a guest on someone else's podcast. A month or so later, your episode has gone live and they introduce you to someone who's a prospective client of theirs and they link to that episode. You look so great in that scenario. That person is going to be, love you. And if you do that for someone who's already your champion, they're going to love you even more. So let's talk about the other end of the spectrum. So, there's a gold medalist and then there's everyone else who doesn't land on the medal stand. So they've worked really hard. They've trained really hard and they haven't gotten anything to show for it. And what we like to say is that a lot of times what happens is they focus on the minutia. And there's limited time and energy that you have to put into this. It's a very finite window, just like the Olympics, to succeed. And focusing on the minutia, what color is my jersey, things like that don't matter as much when it comes to athletics is, there's a carryover to the world of podcasting. And so what are some of those different examples of minutia, Jeremy?
I mean, people spending too much time on, like, for instance, people will spend hours and hours figuring out what is the right software I should use for recording. Okay. Just don't overthink things too much. There's already something you use, so use it. Like, is one of their software going to be better than Zoom, or, the quality's good. I mean, we use, Zoom for our interviews. Now, people are like, we have Zoom, but I'm not sure if the video quality. Great. Okay. When you have like millions of subscribers or whatever, like, then go off and spend 3 hours doing research. So just don't overthink it. If you already use a company, use something, just use it. Second is, again, on the technical aspects, people will spend hours and hours researching mics and equipment and technology setup. Again, we're talking about a B2B podcast. If you are NPR, great. Like, that's your business. You can research all you want and get $1,000 mics. There's amazing, easy solutions, affordable solutions. Like, we use, I use a Blue Yeti. John using an ATR 2100. Just don't overthink those things. Just get it started.
Right. Now, another example is people who they spend personally hours and hours, too much time on the podcast, or their team spends too much time. And oftentimes for the team, it means they're torn between client work or internal initiatives or internal marketing work like the podcast, which leads to frustration for the team.
So when you say on the podcast, do you mean like trying to scour over the audio, or
frequently what? That's the case, right? It could be the post-production. I've talked to people that have $5 million businesses and they're editing video themselves, and they'll say to you, I'll say, what's the big goal of your business? Well, I want to go to 5 million to 10 million. Well, then why are you spending time editing video yourself? Or why are you spending an additional 90 minutes or 2 hours after the interview's over, combing over and reading through the content yourself? You shouldn't be spending your time on that versus getting an introduction from a guest that you had on to someone else, following up with that person, having a conversation with that person about being a guest on the podcast. That one relationship could be tremendously valuable to you. So you're stealing your own time and energy and attention away from what you should be doing, spending time on stuff which is minutia. And I would put in that category also spending a lot of time fixating on the audio quality. That includes cutting out ums and ahs. And, and we don't say this because we believe in inferior quality sound. We say this because we know we've seen this many times before. We've seen people that focus their time and attention on the wrong things, and it steals time and attention away from the things that they should be focusing on.
Yeah. And on that front, you still want to keep the authenticity of the conversation, and, making it too polished. People sometimes see through that. And also, it doesn't allow you to, it doesn't force you to get better necessarily as an interviewer. If you do, like I say certain things and it forces me because I'm not telling the audio person, cut this out, cut that out. I keep it in there. So I've had people criticize me on YouTube and say, you're doing this. And if I cut that out, I wouldn't get better and wouldn't realize that.
Right. Yeah. And it becomes kind of a crutch. If you know that someone's going to clean it up for you afterwards, then it allows you to depend on that rather than, and I'm choosing my words really carefully right now, you can tell, rather than trying to get better naturally, which is a skill, which is incredibly important. If you want to be a speaker, if you want to speak on stage, if you want to be on other podcasts, you have to get better at that. You have to learn to improve your language. And it definitely will over time. I mean, podcasting has definitely made me a better speaker.
100%.
Some other qualities that people focus on who don't land on the medal stand versus gold medalists, focusing too much time on the written content or the production end of things, rather than making sure they're using the right strategy, rather than using it as an outreach tool, rather than having great conversations. And then also, of course, this goes without saying, but people who try and manipulate and use a podcast in a salesy way, trying to, in a manipulative way, get trick prospective customers into what effectively becomes a sales conversation. Now, I'm all for people who use a podcast, connect with people who might be a prospective client, have a great conversation, and at some point transact business together. But we all know the difference between someone who's just trying to trick you into a sales conversation and those who are doing it in order to deliver value. Don't be those types of person who's just trying to trick you into a sales conversation.
Yeah. I mean, if your thought should be, how do I add as much value as humanly possible to this person? That's the mindset that we go in with.
Thank you all for being here, and go check us out. Smart Business Revolution, Inspired Insider is Jeremy's podcast. It was a pleasure talking about this, and we will talk again soon.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like $100 grand.